Redditors with peacocks, what is the worst most interesting thing you have had happen? I used to own an albino peacock named George. He would sit on the top of my garage perfectly still until someone pulled into our driveway, then divaboom the poor soul like it was fricking Pearl Harbor. That is hilarious. I never peacocks were so mischievous until this thread. I grew up farming with my grandfather, and one of his dogs kept killing the chickens that'd get out of the hen house. He read somewhere that if you got peacocks, they'd keep the chickens safe and you could sell the feathers. So he did. The first time a hen got out and the dog came charging in, I saw the peacock jump, fly over a fence and land right in front of the dog. It made this unbelievably loud hiss click scream sound and opened its tail. The dog ran away making that whimpering sound. My uncle owns a few peacocks. When we were younger, he gave us the feathers they lost. Oh, and one day there was a peacock that pooped through the chimney. We have a neighborhood wandering peacock. It is a complete butthole and chases the friendly fixed feral and on occasion will block traffic by puffing up and screaming. Complete dickhead. I worked at a water park that had one attacked an obese lady on her scooty puff, but the scooter could nowhere near outrun the peacock. Imagine seeing this huge lady screaming her head off like a banshee while this glorious bird chases her down the sidewalk pecking at her and her scooty puff the entire time. It was hilarious. Too bad Scooty Puff is just a Futurama joke because it would make the greatest name for a mobility scooter. We have friend who lives in an LA suburb with lots of feral peacocks. He hates them. They are apparently aggressive as frick. Will get into your house and crap all over the place. Don't own any peacocks myself, but there is a group of them that wander around campus at my university. They are quite tame and love having their picture taken, but they don't do much of interest other than sit around. That said, I have heard they will rip your arm off if you call them chickens. They love having their picture taken. I've got one peacock and one peahen. They're not really that much different from my chickens, except bigger and louder. Oh, and they fly much better. Then again, I own chickens, ducks, geese, guineas, and quail, and I had turkeys, so really anything poultry doesn't seem that weird to me anymore. And they probably do things that others would think are interesting that I just think of as normal daily occurrences. Holy crap, I've never had a relevant Reddit thread for this story before. A while back, mid-1990s, my brother and I lived in Nigeria. My parents working at the US Embassy there. We had a pet peacock named Fred. One day, on his way out to work, my dad picked up one of Fred's feathers that had fallen off and placed it on a table inside. Not thinking much of it, he comes back later that day and hears some screaming from inside the house. He rushes inside and on the table he had placed the feather earlier was a huge pile of peacock feathers. In the room over, he finds an almost fully defeathered Fred being wrangled by their slightly bloodied, frustrated gardener, who had assumed the feather on the table was an instruction to obtain more peacock feathers. The poor, naked Fred then had to endure a crowded Abugian bus ride across town to a new compound we were moving to on my mother's lap. He got eaten a few weeks later by a pit bull equals. We had them when I was a teenager. Started with 2, ended up with about 5 of them, but the babies often died. We could never tame them enough to eat out of our hands. They were pretty vicious and the dogs wouldn't go outside to have a bone. They couldn't eat in peace. They would come inside sometimes and eat the dead insects, but they would also crap everywhere. The worst thing that happened, the male was standing on my parents' bed one day. When we went in to get him out, he felt trapped, so he flew right through the window. One got her legs cut off by the hay baler. My mother eventually got sick of them and they ran into an axe. Sounds fun. Buried story time about Kevin, the nerdy peacock who joined the gang. Living out in the middle of nowhere, my dad likes birds and got 4 peafowl, 2 peacocks and 2 peahens. They were annoying as all heck, hunking and pooping everywhere. Like everyone else's story above, the females both wandered too far away one day and died what I hope was a horrible death at the hands of a possum and or a hawk within the first 6 months. So the 2 males, living, being pretty, got named Alfonso and Kevin. Alfonso started getting quite territorial, including any time he walked by the house and saw his own reflection. He would attack his own reflection and ruin the glass. This is especially crappy when I would get home from work and just want to fap and nap in peace. Then suddenly you'd hear something attacking the window and honking bloody murder. Alfonso had to vent his anger on a living thing eventually, and picked on Kevin, even plucking out all of Kevin's crown feathers. They stick out on top of the peacock's head to show his dominance. Kevin, in his sad, sorry existence, set out into the woods to die at the hands of any but his bully and enemy. Kevin, alone and in the dark, stumbled across a band of wandering turkeys. Similar in species, if not color, the turkeys adopted him in and show them their ways of survival. To hide in trees, to fight with beak and claw. So Kevin learned. 2 months had passed. My family and I had assumed Kevin became food for a hungry coyote. Alfonso was largely still an annoying shithead, even when we threw ice at him for attacking windows. Out of the woods struts Kevin. My dad, excited to have his birds back, decided to shut both of them in the old bird coop for the night. I assumed my dad thought he could shut them up together and Kevin would realize he is better off back home. I awoke the next morning with my bird-loving dad sighing. He said I should go check out the bird coop. Inside, the doors open for the day, Kevin proudly stood. Alfonso's corpse lay to the side, his head completely severed. Kevin, the mother, had joined a gang of turkeys, won their trust, and learned their trade. He had literally pecked Alfonso's annoying head clean off. It was laying on the floor in shock. The best part was, the crown feathers had all been picked clean off. Freaking Kevin's man. My family has a house near a zoo. This zoo is located in the middle of nowhere. The zoo used to see some business before the town started to die off, but it is really just two family friends living out in a house who let people pay to come and visit their pets. Their pets are not normal pets though. They have had lions, camels, horses, chickens, tigers, and more over the years. At this point they just live with their pets now, and are pretty much tied down, so we go over to visit sometimes to bring them some joy. Well, one time we pulled up and saw that their peacock was stuck on the roof. Peacocks apparently don't fly far but can fly if they really want to for shorter distances. Well, this one was stuck up on the roof and didn't want to come down. The zookeepers didn't want to use a ladder to climb up to get it down because that was dangerous and the ladder was covered in horse dung out in the field for some reason. They said the peacock would eventually flutter down and be okay. So about an hour later, we're inside looking at the little hamsters ferrets when we hear a commotion from outside. What had happened was the peacock had apparently tried to fly down and had ended up in the lion's den tiger's pen. I don't remember which, but it doesn't matter much. Well, the animal tried to attack the peacock. I mean, who wouldn't if a brightly colored bird just flew into your habitat? The peacock was at this point out of the enclosed area, likely having flown back over the top. But this animal was making some kind of noise like I've never heard before. It was sickeningly evil sounding, almost like it was giving birth to the devil through its butthole. The peacock looked awful too. Basically all of its feathers. Are they feathers? I think so. From its left side were torn out and laid strewn around the lion's tiger's den. We kind of hurried out of there because all of the animals had started making loud noises which only added to the commotion, and the owners were really upset by what had happened. TLDR. Peacock got his left feathers torn off in a zoo, but he's alright now. Sounds like your neighbors need to hire Matt Damon. True story. Hopefully this doesn't get buried. My uncle had 2 peacocks that he built a huge enclosure for at night to stop coyotes from getting to them. Well, it turns out that 2 peacocks can brutally murder a single coyote via throat rip. Yup, they got out of their enclosure, chased after and attacked the coyote that was previously trying to break in, and ripped his little hungry throat out. It was freaking awesome. I'm going to upvote this because I really hope that some redditor out there who owns a peacock and can reply to the question seriously. Yeah, like I've seen niche Reddit threads before and thought that's kinda ambitious, but this one is next level unlikely. Don't own one, but there are about 100 that live in my neighborhood, and the flock keeps freaking growing. I swear every day I see a million of them. They all crap on my driveway and make the most obnoxious noises in the middle of the night during the day. I try to scare them by pretending I'm a giant and run straight at them. Late to the party here, but my grandparents have had a peacock for most of my life. His name is Pecky and he is a glorious bird. He took care of their ducks, chickens and other birds. He wandered the neighborhood and some of the neighbors would brag about him, claiming him as their own. One day, someone dropped a female in my grandparents' yard. No idea who it was. They started a family, had like 6-8 babies. Poor Pecky would sit in this tall pine tree before the female came at sunset and just cry out of loneliness. I felt so happy that he had his own family and wasn't the only peacock anymore. Their next door neighbor got fed up with the babies though and killed them all and the female. I was half broken. Poor Pecky lost everything. He is still around. My grandpa has passed away and my grandma is looking to move away. I want to find him a good home where he can be with some of his own. I am sure this will be buried in the thread, but I wanted to share Pecky's story. Peacocks are next level stupid. We never owned any, but I remember coming across one while taking a walk through the woods near some farms. My friend and I were just walking down the path when further down we saw a peacock sitting right in the middle of the path. We had to go past anyway, so we calmly and slowly walked towards it. The moment that peacock spotted us, it seemed to be in mortal terror. It honked and sprinted towards the left of the path, but the bushes were so thick that it basically just got its head in before getting stuck. So it backed up, tripping over itself, and turned around to sprint into the bushes on the opposite side of the path where the exact same thing happened. It backs up again and stares at us for a split second. We were still over 30 feet away and just standing there looking at this stupid bird go nuts. With left and right out of the question, this bird decides that up is the best way to go and takes a jump up before spreading its wings. Awkwardly, this bird tries to do a vertical takeoff by flapping like crazy. We were under a heavy canopy of oak trees and it's so clumsy at flying that it pretty much hits every single branch on the way up before trying to settle on a high branch, where it immediately loses its balance due to having hit its head half a dozen times and falls back down, hitting every single branch on the way back. It sounded like a bag of sand just flopping from one branch to the next. It hits the ground with a sound that can only be described as PLFH. The bird scrambles back onto its feet and looks me straight in the eye. At this point, my friend and I are staring at this bird like, "Are you serious?" The bird just rapidly waddles a 180, dragging those long tail feathers through the dusk like a broom, before just sprinting down the path directly away from us. It wasn't even honking anymore, just putting all its effort into hauling butt into the distance. The level of stupidity demonstrated by this bird was just surreal, and we never figured out what we did to scare it that much. I worked summers at a state park as a seasonal. One day a few years back, I went to throw some trash in the dumpsters near our enclosed wastewater area. I get distracted by a flurry of movement near the fence. My head co-worker Roger is doing some strange karate-like moves to a cornered peacock. Oh, I'm not hallucinating from the 100-degree heat, am I? He goes in for a karate chop to the bird's face when the thing lets out a banshee-like scream and attacks Roger's face. The bird's spurs gouge this guy's forearm pretty deeply before it flies off and proceeds to run out of the enclosure. This ridiculous incident was somehow covered by workman's comp and my co-worker got to spend the next week at home. I never saw that badass bird again. My great-grandparents had some. I was very well taken care of by the birds. They would escort me everywhere in the village, very protective of me and wouldn't let strangers near. They were very loud though. They would wake me up at 4 every morning. I started to hate them after a while for their constant noise. But one day I was walking down the road and someone tried to take my Game Boy Color. Heck broke loose. I heard the pack leader send out his call, and then all of a sudden the flock attacks the guy. It saved me and my Game Boy. Since then I'm convinced they are caring buttholes. Love them to death and can't really complain. I'm in their debt. About 18 years ago, we were getting prepared to take a direct hit from Hurricane Fran. I was helping my dad get the chickens and peacocks back into their coops before the storm hit. We got all of them back into the shelter except for this one stubborn male peacock. We tried to lure him with corn, tried to chase him down. Nothing was working. They are pretty dang fast when they want to be. We decided to give it one last shot. My dad chased him down running full speed and dove at him. Turns out all he grabbed was the base of his tail feathers, which detached, and the peacock just kept on running. He ended up with 2 handfuls of tail feathers and no peacock. From my angle it looked freaky, like he just ripped the whole bird in half. The peacock suddenly lost 3/4 of his body and for a second I didn't know what the heck happened. So now the thing looks completely ridiculous, like a long-necked, bare-assed, blue chicken running around honking like a car alarm. My dad was pee and said frick him. We went inside and put the feathers in a vase and waited out the storm. The peacock came back around a couple of days later, looking a little beat up, but at least he survived. I've got one more peacock story. One fine spring day we noticed our female peacock sitting on eggs. My mom and I were excited thinking of the little baby peacocks that would be coming soon. A few days later my mom rushes into the house and yells at me to come outside. I run out and she's over by the chicken coop with a shovel. There I see a 6 feet black snake crawling away with 4 huge round lumps in its body. This dang snake ate the peacock eggs. I took the shovel and slammed it into the snake's neck, stomping on it to make sure I cut its head off. Then my mom runs and grabs a pair of scissors and cuts the whole snake lengthwise, unfolding its body and taking the eggs back out. We washed them off and put them back in the nest. A few weeks later they hatch and we have cute little fluffy peacocks running around in the pen. A couple of days after I hear my mom screaming outside and I run to see what's going on. There is another big black snake crawling out of the peacock pen with 4 lumpy masses in its belly. It's the baby peacocks. My mom was super pee. She grabbed a shovel and beat the crap out of that snake. I guess death finds a way. We don't have peacocks anymore, but we still have a closet full of feathers. Okay, the second story is just special. Apparently those peacock babies were supposed to get eaten by a black snake and your mom just delayed their inevitable fate. I'm not sure if this counts, but when I was 12 years old a peacock chased me halfway across a zoo. Though, it seemed more like the peacock owned me than it at the moment. Like it was out taking me for a walk. I probably needed it though. I'm not gonna lie, I would laugh my freaking butt off if I saw a 12-year-old being chased through a zoo by a peacock. It would be the highlight of my year. After a local 100-year flood event, a peacock washed up in my backyard. He was chill and I would feed him. One day he gets all aggressive as heck with me, going for my face and the like. I think about taking after him with a broomstick but retreat inside. He leaves the property after about a 3-week stay at this point. I see him 2 weeks later being chased down the shoulder of the highway by 2 sheriff's officers. I imagine he held up a liquor store. My dad told me about when he was a child my gran bought a peacock, but she didn't tell my granddad, and when it woke him up early the next morning he shot it. The neighbors who had a dairy a bit down our road from us had a few peacocks. You'd find them in our yard at times. Dad would give me their feathers and we ended up with a small vase of them. Other than standing in the middle of the road and honking back at you when you beeped your horn, they didn't really cause any trouble. Got along well with our dogs and the cats wouldn't mess with them. The drive-in theater would be frequented by a peacock who would sit on the back fence. There'd be a very dramatic moment or silence during the movie and all you'd hear from the back is crow han 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 han. We used to raise peacocks and let them roam during the day. One day one of the males decided to venture towards the road. A car starts approaching and in my mind I'm thinking surely this bird has enough sense to get out of the way. Unfortunately, the bird had other plans. It faces the oncoming vehicle and spreads its plumage in all of its splendor and glory as it gives off one of its mighty cries. And then poof, a giant cloud of peacock feathers and no more peacock. The Gandalf of peafowls. You shall not pass. In Texas, along the Guadalupe River for instance, old school families keep peacocks around the house, and have done so for a while. Their staff, listen up, here, young dummies. Peacocks are A. Territorial, and B. Aggressive serpentophilous. I might have made that term up. What does this mean? Old school, gringo families moving to Texas had many challenges beyond their iffy grasp of cartography and international treaties. Specifically, poisonous snakes. Now, coral snakes kinda had to chew on you a bit to get the poison working. And rattlesnakes you could generally depend on to warn you when you got too close. As long as you weren't digging too dang quick into whatever ain't yours. Look up Davy Crockett. He didn't know Texas was Mexico, which is any dang place a buzzworm chooses as his own. Copperheads I never could figure out, but now, water moccasins. The old cottonmouth. Those suckers are territorial, aggressive, hissy, and venomous. A lot of folks have tales of killing cottonmouths. They come at you from across the water, off the bank, heck, sometimes out of trees. Some folks don't have these stories. This latter group's got gravestones. Just like geese have been found out to be very capable sounders of the alarm when interlopers appear, but with more of a royal guard gurkha deadliness about them. Peacocks have been employed as anti-snake measures around dwellings, barns, and the like, for centuries, and they get the job done. Their territorial nature keeps them put, generation after generation, and they are damned efficient snake killers. Florida king snakes and the mongoose are similarly symbiotic with humans, so let's all do our damnedest to not pit any of these three against each other. TLDR, they are territorial and deadly against venomous snakes, and they're, well, showy and decorative. So I'm late to the party, but I actually have something for this one. When I was a kid, I grew up on a sort of recreational farm in middle of nowhere central New York that my grandparents put together. We've had several peacocks over the years. Generally they did nothing particularly interesting, but our first male, Perry, has a bit of a story. He was a pretty cool bird, would act as a guard dog around the farm, as well as harass any random animal or person that looked like a potential mate by following them around with his tail plumage raised high. We've always had a bit of a feral dog coyote problem in our area, though, so when, one morning, Perry was nowhere to be found except for a handful of stray tail feathers, we assumed the worst and that he had been drug off by some canids. He never really tolerated being penned up, and was known for wandering off onto neighbors' property, and it seemed like his insistence on being uncaged at night finally caught up with him. What was a surprise, though, was when, later that fall, a flock of wild turkeys was passing through our backfield, and we happened to notice one odd-looking turkey in particular. Yup, it turns out Perry decided to up and join this flock of turkeys for a few months, and they seemed completely content to have him along. He did end up returning to the farm once the flock moved on, so happy ending I guess. I've always wondered what kind of adventures that crazy bird must have had while out sowing his wild oats with those turkeys. I don't know if frozen peacocks count, but I lived next door to this really old German woman who was at least a Nazi fan. But that is another story. The upkeep on her house was just getting too much, so she decided to sell and move to a trailer park. She asked me to help out, and being a good neighbor, I agreed. She had 3 chest freezers. One of them was full of frozen peacocks. I had no idea people even ate them. She seemed sincere in giving them to me, so I feigned gratitude and loaded them onto the back of the truck. Turns out that her husband hand packaged them for eating, which made them at least 15 years old. Fast forward a few hours, I am driving on the highway to the dump and glance in my rear view mirror, only to be met with a scene of horror. Rush hour traffic is in a state of panic behind me. My tailgate has dropped and I am launching a solid ball of 15-year-old frozen peacock death from the back of my truck at a steady interval. I am the kind of guy that leaves notes if I scratch someone's car. But how do you deal with a highway full of irate commuters assaulted by frozen peacocks? I took the nearest ramp, fixed the tailgate and slunk back home via the back roads. The strangest part of this story is that it is 100% true. An eccentric neighbor had peacocks. They roamed the neighborhood but needed to go back to this mega hutch he built for them at night. The ladies would just show up there, but to get the men peacocks out of the trees and back home, he would walk around the neighborhood with a full-length mirror held to his butt saying, "Here handsome, pretty bird, hey fella etc," and they'd come check out the commotion, see themselves in the mirror, fan their feathers and strut back home. "WHO is this studly peacock? Wait till he sees my feathers, that'll take him down one. You have impressive feathers too. I'm not letting you out my dang sight." Caps, because if you've been around peacocks you know everything they say they holler. One time I woke up and there was a peacock sat on my garden shed. It stayed the whole day and left in the evening. Never saw it again. Also one time I sat down on the ground to eat a sandwich and a peacock walked right up to me. It was nearly the same height as I was sat down and just took my sandwich out of my hands. Another one also once shat on my car. Frit peacocks, man. Well, I have 50 plus of the bloody things. They breed like crazy and they must be stopped. Basically they are the noisiest and bossiest animals on the planet. Basically devil's spawn. I didn't ask for them. About 5-10 turned up one day and then they bred and bred. Their crap is literally a sticky landmine. Did I mention they are noisy? Cause they are as noisy as a glass building exploding at 6 AM every day from the trees around your house. They do have one saving merit. Basically they have terrible digestive systems, hence the awful sticky black crap. But that means they can eat anything. I mean it anything. Poisonous rhubarb, rat bait, styrofoam frigging crates. After they've eaten a couple boxes their crap goes white and looks a bit like blue tack in texture. Also I'm in Australia and in my area are 3/10 of the most venomous snakes in the world. Well guess what? Peacocks love eating snakes, rats and mice too. They keep pecking at the head till it stops wriggling, then they tear em up and eat em, and the poor snake's got nothing in defense. The feathers are thick enough that the fangs can't get through to the flesh, so fighting back looks cool but is pointless from the perspective of the snake. Oh, and mice. They eat the dang things whole. But don't let these positives sway you. They are evil. Holy crap. I actually have a story about peacocks. My stepmother bought a flock. Yes, a flock of peacocks when I was a child. We lived in the middle of a very big city, and I can assure you, the neighbors were not happy. Around the same time, she had also hired a live-in nanny. I was too young to really understand how messed up she was, but now I get that she had drug problems, was probably stealing my stepmother's prescription drugs. She was hitting on my dad, and sleeping with my teenage stepbrother. So anyway, we have this flock of 7 or 8 very loud peacocks, and this crazy nanny who hated them. She was always complaining. Then one day we came home to find all the birds bludgeoned to death. The crazy nanny, gone. Disappeared, leaving all her stuff. Nothing could ever be proved, but she was the obvious culprit. That was a weird part of my childhood. TLDR. My stepmother had a flock of peacocks and the crazy nanny murdered them. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.